Hi, everyone. Very good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are joining. It's absolutely a pleasure on my side to welcome two wonderful guests, or I can say two wonderful friends. Um, First, Venkat, if it is okay with you, can I introduce Manisha and then I introduce you?
Absolutely fine. Yes, please,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
okay, sure. So you have this wonderful smiling lady who also happens to be CXO. So you can imagine that people do smile at that level. So it's not that people are always have constipated look and they are so much under pressure so that they don't smile. But here, Manisha is absolutely wonderful lady. She has worked with the organizations like Intel, Amazon at sea level, and she's also a coach. And she's going to bring us the perspective. She is an Indian, but lived in the US, and probably, as I understand, she might be coming back to India perhaps for her first professional assignment. So I think it's our gain, and she's going to share some great insights today. So welcome, Manisha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Most welcome, Manisha. And then I have Venkat with me. So Venkat is, he has done some of the pioneering work for retail industry in India. So he has worked with amazing companies like Unilever and Coca-Cola and Airtel. And then since last 15 years, he has been a part of retail industry. And in his immediate last assignment, he was the CEO of Future Group in India. And then very recently, he has moved out to set up another revolutionary organization called EBO Mart, which was, I mean, since last about, say, 4 or 5 months, Venkat, if I may write.
About 3 months now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So he's going to create another history after creating history at Future Group. So and both of them are coaches, and we are going to interact with them, and it's a free flowing conversation. Okay. So you can chip in with your questions if you need to, and I'm going to have a dialogue with them about how coaching has actually impacted their life and work. So maybe if I can open the conversation, Venkat and Manisha, with this question that um, what was your first brush with coaching? Was it in terms of sponsoring coaching or receiving coaching? So as we don't forget first love, we also don't forget first brush with coaching. So would you like to talk about it?
So, Manisha, why don't you go first?
Sure. Firstly, apologies for me shifting around so much. I'm trying to avoid the sun in my eyes, which I clearly cannot do. So I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to ignore it. Um, Coaching. So I think the word coaching has been relatively new in the sense that the description of the word attached to the action has only shown up in my life for in the last few years. But the action, I actually was blessed to have an early manager when I worked at Intel um, always ask me open ended questions. I was very young. I was an engineer straight out of college. And every time we talked, of course, coming out of college, as most of you may know, and you go into your first job, you just want to be told what to do because you're so worried about doing it wrong. And he would lay the problem statement in front of me, and he would then say, now what? There was no direction. There would be a problem statement, and then there would be, this is where we want to get to. This is the goal. And this is how, I mean, there was this really overwhelming transparency on the beginning and the end with complete ambiguity in the middle. And so that action of leaving that ambiguity in the middle and making me part of it and co-creating with me actually changed my perspective of what corporate spaces are. And as I grew up in the corporate world, that became a habit of mine because I didn't know any different. And I realized that that was actually different from the way many leaders and many managers do things. And then later on, the word coaching got attached to it in some form. So I think I felt it before I heard it, if that makes sense.
Wow. Sure. Great. Thank you, Manisha. Venkat?
Wonderful. Felt it before heard it. It's such a wonderful, wonderful phrase. Yeah, it's very nice. So so for me, it's been self-reflection which got me into coaching. So though I have always been coached, I think somewhere down the line, I I had a reflection. I was reflecting as to what is the leadership style that I have adopted over the period of time. See, been in leadership levels and been in sales and been in FMCG, various growing companies, part of consumption boom in India, part of building consumption in India. It's always been command and control approach.
Mm,
That's how I've always looked at leadership, and it worked. It's not that it didn't work, and I think I was getting very heady also, in the sense set of people who would come and talk to me and ask me what to do, and I would be on a high, telling this is how things have to be done, and results used to come. But then, as command and control as an approach went on, about 3 years back in 2018 or so, there was this new challenge which was in front of me, and that was put forward by my boss here. And he said that, Venkat, we should look at building business 3 times in the next 5 years. Now, that was a proposition in front of me. And I said, okay, 3 years. That means what exactly is required is something that you have to come back and help us discover that journey to building, doubling business in 5 years. So I sat down and I said, doubling business is all about sales, right? You have to get the results. That's when I read this thing from Marshall Goldsmith, wherein there was this whole model which was there, and in that model, I will summarize and talk here. Is it's told about performance, but performance comes because of culture. And where does culture come from? Culture comes from leadership behavior, right? Leadership behavior actually forms culture, and culture is what gives results. So if that's the case, then I said, what is this culture that we're talking about? What is the culture do I want to build? That's when I heard somebody else talking about, do you want to build a company? So I asked my boss, the boss asked me, do you want to build a company or do you want to build an institution? What is it that you want to do?
mm,
So I said, okay, if I have to build an institution, again, it was pointing to culture. So if culture has to change, right, and if culture has to happen, what is it that I need to do? It was pointing to me. It was telling me that the leadership behavior has to change if you have
mm,
to build an institution. That is where the search for um, for for what is that leadership behavior which will build culture came into me, and I started my search. Reflection actually um, uh, made me search for this coaching, and that's when I came across this whole thing about Neuro Leadership Institute and things like that, and I formally got into coaching, understood the method of coaching and how it transforms people, etc. And that's how I came into coaching, and it really came out of, if you go back, where does it start? Where did it start? It started with my boss asking me to say that, asking me for a solution to build a business which can double itself in 5 years. What was he doing? He was actually coaching me. He
mm,
was not commanding me, he was not instructing me. So I think it started with that reflection, and then, therefore, the search brought me into coaching. And today I can say that's my style.
mm. Wow. Wonderful. Okay. So what comes up for me is that the reflection led to inflection, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks that reflection did happen, and it resulted in the inflection, and it's so helpful. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So if I may just link that question to Manisha, that Manisha, after your first brush with coaching, uh, which was the trigger that brought you to getting into learning coaching and becoming a coach?
So a few years ago, I I wanted to do something uh, that would be different. And then when I say different, I mean that I wanted to step away from my daily corporate job at some point. I wanted to go into a more something that I felt was more meaningful for me.
Mm,
I was doing a lot of things that were meaningful at that time for me, as well as corporations and companies and my people and product and customers, all good
mhm,
stuff. But somewhere I wanted to be a little bit more focused on going to bed and saying that I did something better for the world. I
wow.
changed something in the world that was different.
Mm,
Um, I know that I'd been doing it for 20 years, but it needed to change. And so I wanted to step away from corporate. This idea had already come into my head a few years ago, but I didn't know what I would do when I would step away from corporate. I explored and am still exploring nonprofits, NGOs, and a lot of other avenues in which I can foundationally help co-create, change what the future will look like. But as I walked around and talked to people, and I talked to my mentors, I talked to my husband, who's a mentor of mine as well. And in so many ways, I asked them, what can I do? Like, where I know my strengths, but I kind of want to know what the world around me looks at when they see me, because it might be different than what I see as myself. It
mm,
turned out to be surprisingly the same. I kept getting told that go work with people. Every time we hear you talk about your 20 years at work, you don't talk about the work that you did and the customers you got and the business you built. You always talk
mm,
about your teams and the people that you developed. And those people are still around you and they still come to you 20 years later, that maybe you just need to work with people.
mm.
Focus on what you find beautiful about them. Focus on um, your fundamental thought process, which has always been their whole. There's nothing missing. All we've got to do is help find it. So let's figure it out. And with that, about in December last year, December 2019, I'm still in 2020, as you can see. In December 2019, I came across ICF. And I was like, okay, so there's a proper formal certification, there's a proper standard for this. I could wake up tomorrow and become a coach, but if there's a standard, I want to know what it is.
Sure.
And with that, I came across Cocharia. And within a week of coming across pretty much ICF and Cocharia, I signed up and I started. And in the next 2 weeks, I apply for my PCC. So the journey through the last 12, 13 months has been sort of formalizing my love for coaching and my love for people.
Wow. Great. Wonderful. So formalizing love through coaching, so putting a structured process around it. That's very wonderful to hear. And if I may ask both of you that, like Manisha has worked for e-commerce giant like Amazon. Okay, Venkat has worked with multiple companies in retail, and Future Group, equally giant once upon a time in offline market, as you may say. They are the pioneers of retail in India. So, so I wanted to know, and perhaps our fellow participants on this call today also wanted to perhaps understand that how coaching approach has helped you to manage some of the tough situations at work, if it is okay for you to share, and also maybe if any high stakes decisions that you wanted to take, and the coaching approach, coaching competencies, like the new ICF competencies talks about coaching mindset, if I may put it that way. So, so anything that comes up for you, you would like to share with us.
So
Becca, do you want to go first?
yeah, sure. So I think the there are many instances. I think there's so many things that. So if we were to give an example as to what happened, so that The journey of coaching has transformed me individually. That's one which I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you. But most importantly, I think the team that I've worked with, right? That's the reason why um, I had gone into coaching as such, right? To change the leadership side, build a culture, and things like that. So, so what is a model of Marshall Goldsmith say? It said that it is the leadership behavior which builds culture, right? Therefore, leadership behavior is extremely important to make the culture. Without
Mm-hmm.
leadership, there's no culture. But what I
Mm-hmm.
realized after 3 to 4 years of coaching is that culture is something that happens without supervision and when leadership is not there. The
Correct.
success of culture is that.
Mm.
So over the period of last 3 years, and because coaching was has become a part of life, and our teams also became good coaches, and they've implemented it as the way to run the business as such. What happened during pandemic was something that stood as a testimony for me that coaching really works and that it really worked and that culture got formed. If you see that last year, same time around same time in March, lockdown was announced in India. Right, I think a week from now, lockdown was announced in India, and in a way, we'll be celebrating its anniversary in a week's time. So, and lockdown was announced. And what happened is that our stores were shut. It happened in the night, and next day
Mm.
morning, the stores have to open because we were grocery stores, right? And these grocery stores have to open because at the end of the day, shops the pandemic has come, there's lockdown, but people need goods, people need grocery because they have to survive, so stores have to open. Now that is when the whole leadership was in a way locked down, because no leadership was going to go there and open the store. What has to happen is the team has to come and open the store. How will it happen? What is it that we will do? We were
Mm.
stunned. We didn't know what to do. But next day morning, every store, every store in the country opened. The team members walked. There was no transportation available. They they walked down to their stores to open the store. The next day morning, every store opened and they were there to serve the customer. And when you ask the question, how did you make it? Wow, and how did you make it? It was not about how they made it or what they did. It was the answer which stunned me. The answer was that if I don't come, Mr. Sharma, who's 65-year-old customer, who walks into my store every day for that packet of milk, would not get the packet of milk. Who will serve that 65-year-old customer was the question. There was another team member says that there is this Miss Smita who was physically challenged, but how who will serve that customer?
Wow.
Lockdown has been announced, but who will serve that customer? It is me. I have to serve the customer because whenever she's come to the store, she asks for me, and it's my duty. What was
Mm.
it showing? It was showing that culture is set by leadership behavior, but culture successes when the leadership is not there. And lockdown
Mm.
was truly when leadership was locked down, right? So I truly felt that coaching as a culture, what it did is it did build the the whole culture, which showed itself in the time of, I won't say crisis, but when it needed, right?
Yeah.
When it needed, every member was standing out there and saying, I am there, count me in. And the
Wow.
reason was not anything. Reason was that the culture was set up of saying, I need to count for and be there for that customer who needs me.
Mm.
I guess what is it saying? It is talking about empathy. It's about it's about saying that being present for somebody. It's about saying that I am there for you, right?
Mm.
It's really being there for the people, right?
Mm.
So what is all that? It's really what we talk as fundamentals of coaching, right? And
Wow.
that has its impact. This really is an example which has come to me just now, but I really feel that it's right. Leadership is what leadership behavior sets the culture, and culture is set by the leaders, but
Mm.
culture is what is demonstrated and what happens when leadership is not there. And I
Yeah.
think this culture was thanks to the coaching style and coaching process, which was adopted by the collective leadership of the team that I was a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Hmm. Wonderful. And before I go across to Manisha, I think Venkat, one big acknowledgement for unsung heroes like your team. We never realized. We all talk about frontline Corona warriors like doctors and paramedics and all other staff, the government machinery. But yes, I mean, and retail deals with day to day, and somebody who may need, and people are showing up. So what I also heard you say that when leadership is not there, but it's very difficult for most of the leaders to be not there. So I think one of the coaching behaviors that I noticed in what you mentioned was also about, as coaches, we are okay to be invisibly present. Yeah. So we are just there as a mirror, and client does everything. We just be there. We show up. So wonderful. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure. So, yes, Manisha, curious to hear from you as well.
So thank you, Venkat, for sharing such an inspirational story. Definitely warms the heart to hear humanity step up during such a tough time,
Thank you.
um, especially the humanity that we've been developing over years, and you see them do something that is exceptional. So thank you for sharing that. Um, I think in the workplace, the fundamental of coaching for me starts with trust.
Mm,
Um, if we if we as leaders just trust everybody around us, our peers, our stakeholders, our employees, that foundation allows, first of all, to reflect back on you for them to trust you, right?
mm,
And that opens up space. I think it opens up more space than exists when you don't trust or when trust is not there. And that opened space allows for conversations that would not exist,
mm,
allows for people to share their ideas, share their views, share vulnerabilities that they would otherwise not share because there isn't, fear isn't there, and ego is not there. And all of these other things that hold us back, create walls around us, diminish.
mhm,
And so, if we start with a foundation of trust, as leaders, we trust our employees to do what is right. And this goes back to Venkat's point, right? We trust them to do what is right. If we share everything that needs to get done and we share visions and goals with them, then just step back. You've created the space for them to do what they're supposed to do and the strengths that they bring to the table.
mm,
The strengths that they bring to the table are not my strengths. They're not the leader's strengths. We've hired them for different reasons. So let those strengths and those abilities and those skills shine by, again, going back to what I had originally said is tell them the problem statement, tell them what we want to achieve at the end, and that achievement should be co-created with them, and then give them the space in the middle to go and do the best and bring their skills to the table and shine. The process from the beginning to the end, that in the middle has a million paths.
mm,
Let us not, as leaders, define what those paths are because we are limited, right? Our skills are limited, our abilities are limited, our strengths are limited if it is just us. So if I went to someone and said, I want you to do this and I want you to do it this way and I want you to get here, I'm taking away the million paths that may allow us to create something bigger and better in a better way that is sustaining in so many different paths, right? We stop that from happening. And I
mm,
think that is part of creating culture that Venkat is talking about, which is how do we create cultures where there's not set tables, where someone's got to come to the table and you've got to be good enough to come to the table? How do we create open spaces where all ideas can flow so that the path to our goals and our path to our visions are bring in possibilities that we had never thought about? And that brings in innovation. And to me, all of that starts with the fundamental of trust. As I said, trust opens up more spaces.
Mm,
Trust allows us to debate and not be scared that we'll get reprimanded, allows us to have conflict that stops us from believing that conflict is a bad thing, or I shouldn't argue with someone because we've been taught not to. No, all of these things are good. Constructive conflict creates innovation. Innovation creates new possibilities. New possibilities creates a path forward that we never thought about. So to me, I keep going back to cultures and leadership and communities and workspaces, starting with trust.
mm,
So I'll stop there just because I'm so passionate about this idea. And I'll just stop there to see if there are any questions. Venkat, if you have any thoughts to add there.
Absolutely. I think, Manisha, it's so well said. I think trust is the foundation, no doubt about it. And I guess in this, in what is one thing which is constant that we've seen in the last decade is been the change, constant change, which is engulf people. That's number one. Second thing that we change is what we're seeing is the information boom in the market, right? In the whole world, everybody knows everything. Right, it's that something which is it happens everywhere. Everybody knows everything. Google is helping them to reach information is available a click away. When that is there, the old method is really about saying, I will tell you, you do it, right? That's the method in which this whole industry has worked in the past. But then we also know, borrowing your word, of saying that this change, when it has happened because of innovation, and innovation backed with fresh thinking. Now, this innovation backed with fresh thinking, where does it emanate from? It doesn't emanate from outside. It emanates from inside, right? And when innovation and fresh thinking are backed with commitment, is where the magic happens, right? And where does commitment come from? Commitment again comes from inside, right? And that
yeah.
inside commitment coming from inside sometimes remains subdued when when not nudged. And I think as what coaches we do, I think is we nudge that inner potential, right? We nudge that
Mm,
inner potential to come out. It's not that it is not there, but it's just that the team realizes it. And what comes out is not something which is inside, but what comes out is synergistic reaction of something which is a super leap from where the current status is. So you're right, absolutely right. I think the trust is so important that it actually manifests itself into fresh thinking, innovation backed with commitment. And I think as coaching as a style of leadership helps one to achieve the fresh thinking and commitment to an action.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I was listening to perhaps the new ICF competencies. Several words have been, spoken about that. So, and I can see that the coaching has actually somewhere, now embedded into your DNA. So that reminds me of asking one question to both of you, that when you are sitting on that chair right now, and when you have any tough situation to manage, maybe there are some high stakes, there is a fear which comes up because one decision can take the organization on this side or that side. So how coaching can perhaps is helping you to manage yourself and perhaps manage some situations. So any thought, any anecdote you would like to share?
Uh, yeah, Manisha, do you want to go first
So
or?
the
Yeah.
yeah, so the what comes to mind is I'll actually give you a slightly tangential story or a tangential example, and sort of relate it back to how we as leaders, or at least how my environment reacts to it, right? Um, so the world over the last I think Venkat mentioned about information system, about information being readily available. We all know what's happening. There's big data out there. And having worked for big data companies for a very long time now, um, everything that is done in most environments is customer driven product development. So when I say customer driven product development, I mean that we won't have someone come up with a product or a solution in a vacuum because the engineer thinks this is a really fun thing to build, right? We just don't do that anymore. We
Yeah.
actually look at customer behavior and the needs of a customer to be able to go and build for them. In the environment of big data, where we have a lot of data on customer movement, customer behaviors, what they want, what are they buying, what are they clicking on, all of that information, it actually just tells us what to do. And so when you come in as leaders in a company that is at the service of the customer, right? That's what we're there for, is at the service of the customer with goals attached for the company's corporate goals that are there. One of the things that we do as leaders is we step back and detach ourselves from the decision that we need to make or the direction that we need to take based on personal ego and opinion, because it doesn't matter. What I think, as a single data point and a single customer thinks, is not really relevant. My opinion on what the product should look like or where the button should be or any of that is actually not relevant. Nor is it relevant for the engineer that's building it, nor is it relevant for the data scientist that's writing the algorithm. What is relevant is the customer data. So what makes it easy is to step back and use coaching here to say, who are we in service for? Right? We're in service for
Yeah.
the customer. So let the customer and the customer's data guide us in what to do best for them. So let's not argue about the decision that needs to go in one direction or another. Let's use what our customer, who we're in service for, let's listen to it.
Mm.
Let's listen, let's question, let's have open-ended views on what they're doing. Test and learn, right? The whole agile environment of test and learn. Let's do all of that and figure out what they want, how they will react the best, how we will get what we want as a win-win in return. It's the only way to build a sustainable business. And what that does is it creates back to a culture, it creates an idea of creating space to listen to who we're in service for. Right? So it's more foundational than a one-on-one relationship to, let's say, me and my employee creating space and having a coaching and having space and ambiguity created so we can find solutions. It's actually a stepping back on the company's culture to say we all as a company are in service to one group of people and one group of people only. So if we can do it right for them and listen, we'll do it right for each other and listen.
Mm. Interesting.
Yeah, lovely. I think I love that thought of listen to serve. I guess that is something which is wonderful, Manish. I think that's a powerful thing indeed. I guess that's where I guess co-creation and partnership starts, right? When you know the real thing about empathetic listening is, I guess, if it is backed with wanting to serve, you listen to serve. I think that's a very powerful, I get insight into building partnership and co-creating. Wonderful. It's such a such a wonderful concept. Yeah, and we do talk about active listening, but listening to serve is something which I'm borrowing. I will use it someday for sure. Thank you very much, Manisha, for that.
Sure. So, okay. Now as I wanted to check with you from coach's perspective. What would you advise to coaches? Okay, so as you are sitting on the top and you are looking at coaches from outside, okay, who may be hired to serve your, say, employees, your key talent. So, what would you expect? So now you are being a coach. What would you like to advise to some of our coaches? How best? What are the things that they should keep in mind? What are the things they should avoid while they serve the corporates? Any thought on that?
So I can go first, Manisha. It's okay, right? So I think I had, because we when we started off, I was not myself proficient in coaching, or I was not skilled. I was not certified. So at that time, I had hired some coaches to help our teams, etc. So one thing I would definitely tell them is, while follow the principles of coaching, um, which is so important, because as there is a pressure which is there from the organization and from the sponsor, for sure, right?
Mm,
But I think as a coach, uh, the principal duty is towards the coachee only. I think that's the
mm,
organization, and the sponsor, of course, is important, but the principal duty is towards the coaching. I think that's one which I would definitely ask every coach to follow, because what
mm,
happens, I think, is that there are pressures from the organization, and under these pressures, we have rules as coaches what we are supposed to do, and we do it. But while doing so, keep the interest of the coachee in mind. Nothing is more important than that. That's something which I would definitely advise, not advise, but I would say that that is something which I would expect from any coach that I would hire for my team.
mm. Okay, okay, sure. Thank you, Venkat. Anything from you, Manisha?
So just to build on Venkat's point about keeping the foundations of coaching and the service to the client alive, I think there is a corporate in corporations, and Venkat's probably experienced this for many years, is we go through review cycles, right? Every single year, every 6 months, we go through a lot of review cycles. And depending on the culture of the company, depending on the rigor at which these are done, the review cycle, if for anybody that's on the call that doesn't know what I'm talking about, is a review cycle is a review, ranking, and rating of your
Mm,
employee. The
mm,
review portion of it is of basically going through all that the employee has achieved, right? Ranking it is basically putting a number next to how good it is,
yeah.
right? Good, better, best. And then, and I'm sorry, rating is that. And then ranking is to take the person and put it against its cohort and to say, where do they rank? So that you can give them an overall rating on with, and then all compensation, promotions, and everything are decided on this. Every company does this very differently, right? Every company focuses on different things based on their culture, based on their principles, based on their core values. I can't think of a better way to do it, but I'm not sure that this is the perfect way. And the reason that I say that is, in this, there is a discussion that takes place about what an employee's strengths are and what their areas of development or weaknesses are, right? And as a coach coming in from the outside, where we fundamentally believe, that every single person is whole, completely
Yeah.
whole. And we're dealing with employees and an infrastructure that is telling employees underlyingly that they may not be,
Mm,
right? So the companies are telling them that here are your strengths and here are your areas of development that you need to work on. We are coming in as a coach with a slightly different angle to this to say, no, but you're whole, right? So as a coach, as well as a leader in an organization, I come in with these hats and I try to combine these hats to say, you are whole and we all will have opportunities for development. Tomorrow, I will be able to do certain things that I cannot do today, but I'll never
Mm.
become an impressionist painter or I'll never become a fighter jet pilot, right? I will never do that. So I have a lot of things out there in the world that I will never be able to do. So where do I want to spend my energy? And I want to spend my energy on where my strengths are because that's what motivates me. That's what makes me stronger. That's what makes me do the same job 100 times better than if I focused on my development areas to do that job,
Mm.
right? So I think as coaches who come into corporations from the outside, um, those thoughts need to be there to reinforce the idea that the person that you're coaching is whole. And your sponsor may tell you something else, going back to Venkat's point. Your sponsor may tell you something else that this person needs to develop here. The question is, how do you get that person to do the best that they can at their job with what they are already whole with?
Mm. Yeah, great. Very nice. So, do you see both of you in terms of coaching coming to the center of leadership development, as Venkat already mentioned about key leadership behavior? But how coaching do you see going forward, getting more embedded into the culture of the organization? And one of the key leadership practices. Um, any thoughts on that?
Uh, Manisha, would you like to go first or?
Yeah, I think my thought is very simple in the sense that for coaching to be embedded in the culture, for coaching to be embedded in everyday work
Hmm.
that gets done, it needs to start with co-creation. A
Yeah.
small group of people cannot decide the future of the company and then direct everybody else to follow through. So co-creation, of course, starts with the baseline of what is the vision? Can we co-create a vision? Can we
Hmm.
co-create um, aspirational goals that go with it? Can we co-create 1 year, 6 month, 1 month goals for the company in a more co-created way, uh, rather than just a handful of people doing it?
Okay.
Which then goes down to say that how do we, once that space is co-created, again, larger space then, instead of a
Mm.
small space, your goals and your things will be bigger when you co-create versus if you create them together as a small group. And
Mm.
when you co-create a bigger space, everybody feels part of it. So when they create their own personal goal for the same time frame, for the month, for the 6 months, for the 1 year, when they create
Yeah.
their personal goals, they know how to attach it to the larger
Mm.
goal of the company. They know how to attach it to the vision, and the motivation to achieve those goals jumps. It really becomes a lot more aspirational. So I think co-creation is the only word I leave on the table when it comes to coaching and coaching cultures moving forward,
Mm.
um, in the future.
Okay. Sure.
So right, Manisha. I think I resonate with that because I think over as just to take that this thing about the transformation that the world has seen in the last 10 years, thanks to technology and the information boom and democratization of information. Information is no longer information wisdom is no longer limited to a few like it was in the past. It is well spread. So when you tell me when you talk about co-creation, I guess is there any other way forward? I think co-creation means what? It is about partnering with each other, listening to each other.
Mm.
Because democratization of knowledge and information, what has it done? It has done everybody that much more intelligent. pieces of information available with a lot of people. And if some innovation has to come, something good has to happen, if the goals have to be achieved, there's no other go but through active listening to what is said, what is unsaid, like we all know, at the same time co-creation. Only then that all the views, all the knowledge which is there across the organization, when that becomes a part of the partnership and the co-creation process, is when I think an institution is built. That's when performance is going to happen. That whole thing of saying a set of few people, a coterie which runs the business, that's gone. And therefore, if co-creation, like what you're saying, has to take the center stage, the competencies which make coaching has to become the pieces around which the co-creation can happen. And therefore, what is any other way but coaching to make co-creation, partnership, and therefore successful organizations happening? That's the only way to happen. I think that's what I personally feel so.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing those insights. We have a question from Ravi, and I would request we have a space to take few questions from our participants today. So Ravi has asked a question that, and I think that's a question for Venkat, that in any operational project which is driven by steps of activities, okay, which is totally process driven approach, there we don't have the liberty to try the other paths, which means like allowing the team member to try something in their own way, which may create more problem and solution than the solution. So what is your take on that?
Right. I think it's a wonderful question. I think I grapple with it, this question, every time from whenever I speak about coaching as the way to, as an approach. See, what is process, right? Process is actually the most empowering thing that can happen to people, employees in an organization. What does process do? It actually gives you a set of rules and regulations to operate in. That's what it does, right? And by following the processes, nothing stops one from innovation and doing something extra, right? That is how the whole thing is. Therefore, if you were to break our work, there is something called innovation, there's something called
Yeah.
execution, right? Innovation is something which comes from experimentation, and what is there deep within, you're actually using it and improvising on things. That's one part of a job. Another
Mm,
part of the job is execution, and execution can happen only when there's a process,
mm,
right? These two go parallelly. There's never something called as I will do process only or I will do innovation only. Therefore, while innovation is where I think we as coaches can help people discover something new
mm,
through active listening and powerful questioning, making person to reflect, etc. So innovative ideas come in, but then that innovative idea will remain an idea unless it is executed. And
mm,
execution can happen only when there is a standardized process. When there's a standardized process, if that is not there, the idea won't happen.
mm,
Therefore, I think process is extremely important for the idea to succeed.
mm. Okay, sure, sure. Right. So while we await some questions from the participants, I would like to ask you something that what would you advise to the organizations, to corporations, and especially the CEOs, that how they can, what is it that they need to do to allow coaching to take a center stage in the organization, especially when they are more concerned about the business outcomes, profit maximization, stakeholder values. So, where do you see the space for coaching? And this is your advice to our viewers who are CEOs or maybe those who would be watching later on the YouTube. What would you like to tell them?
So I think I'll borrow the word that you used, stakeholder,
Hmm,
right? So when do results happen? When do results happen? And I think all of us are perform. What is everybody focused on? Focused on is performance, right? But if you really reflect, is performance a solo event?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is never, right?
Mm.
Performance is a team event, right? And what does team comprise of? Team comprise of stakeholders, right? When you have stakeholders, what do you have? When you have stakeholders, you have different opinions, different ideas, different thinking, different thoughts, different feelings. Whole lot of things come in,
Mm.
and when they converge, is when the magic happens. And
Right.
what and that is when magic happens, right? And when stakeholders are and this magic to happen, what is it that we need to do? We need to really listen to each other,
Mm.
right? Second, we need to do is we need to ask questions of each other.
Mm.
Third thing that we need to do is stay curious forever,
Mm.
right? When we do these things, what would emerge? What would emerge is a collaborative and collective thinking. And when collaborative and collective thinking happens, what does it result in? It will result in the goals that you have set out to achieve together.
Okay.
And what is and when somebody follows all this process that I'm talking about, what is that team doing, or what is that leader doing?
Mm.
The team or the leader is doing simple only one thing. He is actually following the principles of coaching.
Yeah.
Now the question that I ask anyone who says that there's a different approach. Yes, there's a different approach, but what is wrong in co-creation? What is any other way of doing things than co-creating and partnering? What
Mm.
is any other way of being than being curious? What is
Okay.
any other way of listening than being empathetic? And what does coaching say? Coaching says all these things,
Mm.
right? And if by keeping coaching in the center, what are we getting? We're getting stakeholders getting involved and achieving the results collectively. And therefore, I
Mm.
guess coaching needs to take center stage.
Wow. Okay. So there is a follow-up question from Nayan Kumar on this, and I guess you have already answered that. But he has asked that how can we influence family-driven, family-owned business leader to adopt coaching style?
To Manisha, you would like to?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I think that family-owned businesses are not, when it comes to coaching and coaching adoption, should not be any different than a corporation, right? The family are shareholders, and then businesses have board members and the C-suites and VPs that hold a lot of shares in the company. Um, so the idea of coaching, uh, and detaching it from the ownership of the company is important, right?
Mm.
To understand that because you own the company does not mean that you own every path, every process, every decision. You have a team that is there to make this company successful with you, for you,
Yeah.
and use their ideas, use their thoughts. Again, back to the word of the theme of this whole thing is co-creation. There is no reason that the method changes. Detaching from ownership and detaching that ego from the name of the company that your family has on top, detaching yourself from that and looking at um, the goals that you're setting with your team
Mm.
and how to achieve those goals and inspiring them to achieve them, it should not be any different. So coaching really doesn't change.
Mm.
It's more about ego and detachment.
I think that's a great point. And perhaps looking at the time, I guess last question from Don. Um, he says that how can we create a holistic coaching culture where we may be only coaching individuals at different levels around their own purpose and challenges? And some of them might be self funded as well, although they're a part of the organization.
So I'll throw a thought in here, a small thought, and then I'll let Venkat wrap up. Um, I've seen this happen through some of the companies I've worked for, who've had very empathetic, kind leadership. And what they have done, just very practically, is not everybody's going to go get a certification or take a 30-hour class above and beyond the job that they do. But the ability to ask open-ended questions and be curious, the ability to teach people how to listen and the different levels of listening, the basic skills required to create that extra space.
Yeah.
If you can teach that as courses or learning programs within the organization, and you can hire coaches to create those programs for you if someone within the company cannot do it, but create classes that are taught by leaders within the company so that the employees can see people within their organization stating or allowing or giving permission to behave in a particular way that is positive and being taught by them really embeds that into the culture at all levels, not just the people that at the top who get the coaching from outside.
Mm.
So true. I think uh, to make coaching a way of life, or to become a culture, I guess whole lot of people learn by observing, by noticing, right? So when generally when you see the leadership following certain principles, more often than not, the whole organization follows that, right? So there's nothing more impactful than demonstrated behavior, right? So when the leaders demonstrate deep listening, when the coaches start listening to uh, listening to everyone, whether they are spoken or not, when when there is a huge high level of inquiry and curiosity which the leaders start showing in every interaction of theirs,
Mm.
and this curiosity being manifested in seeking answers rather than giving answers, when such demonstrated behavior is seen by the employees, that behavior in many ways start getting adopted.
Yeah.
Right? So therefore I think when coaching takes center stage at a leadership level, it's a matter of time that the organization starts imbibing these values which govern what coaching is. And these values of coaching are eternal human values. They are not scientific, rocket science kind of stuff. These are eternal human values. But
Mm.
any eternal human value is very difficult unless practiced. And one of the things that leaders have as a responsibility is to demonstrate the qualities which make a coach, and therefore that gets imbibed by the employees who are watching you, who are inspired by you, and therefore culture of coaching can get formed.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, you mentioned about rocket science, Venkat. So in the end, I wanted to bring up this that it's a Newtonian physics. Do not hold true in the quantum mechanics. So that's where Einsteinian laws are mostly applicable. So where there we don't have equal every action as equal and opposite reaction because coaches do not work that way. We operate much at a subliminal level, and absolutely wonderfully expressed, both of you, Manisha and Venkat. I can't thank you enough. Manisha, I think, has her early morning, and Venkat has his late night like me. So thank you both for joining. thank you everyone for joining. I think some of your questions made a huge difference, and your presence and participation was really amazing. So, on behalf of Kucharya and Magda, I would like to thank you, and Manisha and Venkat. Great session, great conversation, and I hope our coaches as well as the CEOs who watch that live or later in the recording get inspired, and looking forward to meeting both of you on another occasion, and wishing you all the very best.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everybody, for listening in and your questions and having us here talk through this.